a beautiful pieces of hers.
I've never seen that.
Oh, really?
And
You know, I worked for the Franciscans, so when I retired, I asked if I could purchase some. And, so they did. And I presented it to the Franciscans because of the fact that Francis, you know, with the Hawaiian themes. That's where I'm from. That's why.
I got to visit her in Hawaii.
Oh,
Everyone hear me?
She brought home to care for her mother.
Can everyone hear me?
To be buried.
a little louder.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
If you're wondering if you're in the right place, yes, you are. My name is Kay Kriesel, and welcome to the first presentation of the Women Religious Artists Project. Now, I'm going to begin with me doing a whole lot of talking about women religious artists in the Dubuque area, their artwork, and their ongoing impact on the local arts community. And then we're going to have an open conversation to carry the inspiration of these artists back with us into our daily lives. To be clear, this is not a religious presentation, partly because that's not my intent, and partly because this is a public library. But we will be discussing religious themes. Now, a little introduction before moving into why we're all here. I studied art therapy at Alverno College in Milwaukee. I brought some of my own books on the topic if you want to look at them afterwards. This is the Alverno book. Taught by the School Sisters of St. Francis, and I'm a textile artist myself. I'm originally from Chicago. I've moved many times. I moved to this area 5 years ago and I'm done, so you're all stuck with me. I was raised Catholic, but I left for many years. Eventually I meandered back, and I give a lot of credit to the social justice, the ecological care, and the artwork of women religious. 2 years ago, I became an associate of the Sisters of Charity, the BBM Sisters, and a print by Meinrad Craighead, Clark alum, who was a Benedictine nun for many years, was present at my welcoming ceremony. Learning about women religious artists was a hobby of mine for a few years, and then I couldn't find any more books on the topic, and I wondered why. As generations shift, archives move, and buildings close, I've become alarmed that so many of these stories and artwork are getting lost. I'm doing similar work in the youth cohort inheriting the Women's Church Convergence. I often refer to the book Guests in Their Own House by Carmel McEnroy. This is the only book in English about the women who attended Vatican II Church Council, the only church council that women attended ever. She explained that she wrote the book decades after the council because nobody else had, and the stories about these women were getting lost. Now, in our case, I'm not alone. There are people who are doing this work. I am trying to join in the mission to keep these stories and the artwork moving into the future. I'm not at the point of a book yet, but I see both overarching artistic practices and generational shifts at both the local and national level, and I think it's imperative to keep the impact of these artists going. Now, for those who don't know, I'm going to give a brief explanation of what women religious are, even though we have plenty of experts in this room. These are Roman Catholic women who take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and who live in community. Sisters go out to the world, and nuns are cloistered. This is the main difference. Each congregation has charisms. A charism is like a mission, but it's a God-given gift for the sisters to share and to bring out into the community. I have yet to discover a congregation that names art as one of its charisms, but instead art is used to spread charisms such as education, freedom, or discernment. I would like to clarify as well what the vows mean for those who probably aren't familiar, and how they really make these artists distinct. Why women religious artists? This is a large part of it. Firstly, the vow of poverty entails communal resources rather than individual. A woman religious wouldn't personally keep the money from selling her piece. That money would go to her congregation. This is very different from having a personal brand. or limiting one's art to commercial appeal, something that many secular artists have been struggling with since commercial art was invented. It's liberating in some ways, but also there's the question of how to use those communal funds in materials, classes, and transportation. When it comes to the vow of chastity, I think Judy Chicago's work from the 1970s and 80s best illustrates how that can impact art making. She created Woman House, a secular women's art commune, one of the first, and then an enormous studio space for the creation of the dinner party, because so many women artists she knew told her that as soon as they managed to get a moment of time in their studios, which was usually a part of the guest room in their homes, within a few minutes, where are my pants? I'm hungry. There aren't any clean dishes. You also agree? The traditional family structure for these women artists left no time, energy, or space for women's art making. Judy Chicago later had women artists create the pieces of the Birth Project in their own homes, and therefore the project took about 7 years longer than she had wanted for these very reasons. While women religious keep very, very busy, and you always have a lot going on, part of the vow of chastity means living in the way of Woman House, or the studio of the dinner party. It's collaborative, it's not hierarchical, and there can be resources, including time, set aside for uninterrupted art making. Now, the vow of obedience I find hardest to understand or articulate. For cloistered nuns, this often means strict obedience of certain individuals put into positions of authority. For sisters out in the world, obedience is more towards mission or charism. Yes, the determinations of the community, but more in a collaborative way. Is that right?
In recent decades.
Yes, in recent decades, yes. When it comes to the arts, I find this quote by Sister Jane Mary Sorosiak explains how the vow of obedience affects the creative process. She says, "My inspiration, I think, comes from the Holy Spirit. Sometimes I have no idea what I'm going to do, and I start doodling and making changes, and all of a sudden, it starts to happen." It's interesting because sometimes the finished drawing is nothing like what I started out with, so it really seems to me that I'm guided that way, and I like to think that way anyway. I like to think what I'm doing is what God wants me to do. I like how she explains how obeying the Holy Spirit while having no idea what you're doing is an intimate spiritual experience that brings artistic development that you never expect. I thought Mary Frances Rice was going to be here.
Me too.
I was going to tell her that she could give out autographs now that she's featured in the presentation. Now, in the Dubuque area, there are 5 congregations of women religious, 4 sisters and 1 nuns. As I've said, I've lived in many different places, and to have so many congregations in a lightly populated area is really remarkable. Some of these congregations are represented more in this presentation than others, which I'll get to at a later point. Now, the artwork created by these local women religious varies in many ways, including media. From paintings, to prints, to textiles, to pottery. From realistic representations to abstract expressions. The general timeline of fine arts in the United States over the past 126 years has started with a strong focus on oil paintings and metal and stone sculptures, and then shifting to kind of brush up against decorative arts and prints, and then the impact of the feminist movement, eventually bringing textiles and ceramics to a near equal standing alongside traditional media. This is a really remarkable shift in a pretty short period of time. In many ways, women religious artists predated the impact of the feminist movement by branching out into other media and into primitive styles before fine art swung that way and before Vatican II. When I first started research for this project, I thought the artwork of women religious in the late 60s and 70s was the creative liberatory spirit of Vatican II and work in the world, but then I discovered they were already expressing that spirit a decade before the council happened. So it took a while for Rome to catch up with them. I attribute this both to how the vows can influence art making among women religious, as I explained, and also a strong emphasis on arts education, while that education was still very limited for secular women. In terms of spiritual art made by women religious, discernment, prayer, and or social justice are common themes. As I'm sure many can tell you, these themes often blend together even outside the arts. Artistic depictions of biblical scenes are very common, as you can see among the physical pieces displayed here. In the early 50s and early 60s, biblical artwork like this could get pretty controversial. About 70 years ago and 2,000 miles southwest of here, Bishop McIntyre chastised Coretta Kent for creating blasphemous pop art depictions of the Holy Family and Bible scenes, despite how much the school run by the Immaculate Heart of Mary community benefited from the sales of her prints. Notice he didn't complain that the traditional depictions had everyone white-skinned, blue-eyed, and blonde. Some of this artwork is done in classical traditions, copying masters and demonstrating artist skill, and some is more stylized, expressing the emotions of the scene and experimenting with media. These demonstrate a lot of freedom in interpreting, relating to, and preaching these Bible scenes. In this room, I have a woodcut print. These are the three Marys at the crucifixion by Sister Chiara Paloni of the Cincinnati Dominicans, as well as a copper piece here, also made by her, depicting Jesus speaking with the Samaritan woman at the well. It is very unusual to see the three Marys from the perspective of Jesus on the cross. That's very, very rare. And what they're doing is they're preparing to wrap his body while the sun sets behind them. They have to do it before the sun sets because then the Sabbath starts and we can do that work. Now, the first thing that I said when I saw this copper piece was, Jesus doesn't have a beard. That's very unusual. In this story, he's having a theological conversation with a very intelligent, outcast woman who he says has had 5 husbands. This is the only depiction of that scene I have ever seen where he looks younger than her, which he probably was. The uniqueness of these scenes made over 16 years ago suggests to me that Paloni thought outside the box and was pretty brave to go from these ideas to these physical depictions. This bravery demonstrates the support she received from her community. And here I have 2 very different quotes about the use of art making as part of vocational discernment and about art showing us that the immigrant is our neighbor. One is more internal and one is more external. Both are equally valid. While it's up to the viewer to interpret an art piece for themselves, quotes like this provide valuable context for art creation and presentation. It's interesting to see how a congregation's charism and an individual's artistic vision can intertwine. And then a very common theme of artwork by women religious is Mother Mary with the baby Jesus. Here we have a clay bas-relief, also by Chiara Paloni, and an oil painting by Sister Elinette Hines, BBM, which I found this at an antique store this past summer, and I was determined to rescue it. Just to make sure somebody who knows what it is would have it. Sister Elizabeth A. Johnson, CSJ, wrote extensively about how Catholics, especially Catholic women, tend to favor images of Mother Mary, either as a visual or a tactile, because art is also for people who can't see it as tactile art, visual or tactile art as an access point for connecting with the divine outside of patriarchy. While each artist would have their own reasons for depicting Mary and Jesus in this way, we have access for their images, but not always their words. I think the frequency of the depiction demonstrates how all of these kinds of spiritual artwork, from prayer to discernment to social justice to preaching, blend together. These spiritual aspects interweave so the artist can share this maternal love between God, the artist, and the viewer. And again, I want to make it clear this is not a religious presentation. I want this to be available to everybody. So even those who believe otherwise can encounter and appreciate the maternal love expressed in these pieces. Sister Grace Remington, OCSO, drew this in 2005 while she was preparing to give a talk on Mary to the nuns in her community, Our Lady of Mississippi Abbey. Drawing this was a way to sort out her thoughts. And later, one of the nuns in her community asked her to put it on the Abbey's Christmas card. It became wildly popular beyond anything Sister Grace ever could have imagined, and she has remained very humble about her skill. It's very unusual for an art piece created by a cloistered nun to gain such popularity, largely because cloistered life doesn't leave time to create art. There are abbeys that have artisanal workshops where the nuns create wood sculptures or prints or other pieces, but they rarely attach any individual's name to any of the pieces. It's created as the community to sell to benefit the community. All the more reason why Mary and Eve is a very unique piece. In this piece, Eve on the left clutches the apple to her chest while feeling Mary's pregnant belly. The serpent is wrapped around Eve's leg, while Mary consoles her and steps on its head, much like she does in most traditional images. For centuries, Mary was called the new Eve, which this piece references, and it also expresses the healing that the coming of Christ brought about. Very appropriate for the solemnity of the Annunciation. And in addition to spiritual work, women religious create still lifes, portraits, abstracts, landscapes, and so on. Sometimes this is what they were called to create, and often it's a part of arts education. Clark University has had many prolific sisters in their arts program for decades, and both spiritual and secular work by the BBM sisters decorate their halls. I think it's important to include this artwork as, again, this project is for everyone, not just Christians. And pieces like these show that the vows of the living community don't limit what an artist can create. Sister, is it Eva or Iva? She was a Franciscan. Iva Hallberg?
I think it's Iva.
Iva. She said that one of the functions of art is to supply the aesthetical needs of the people. And she was talking about all art, not just spiritual art. There have been artists among the sisters of the presentation, such as Kay Coda and Marie Barth. In the lobby of their main building is an exhibit of their congregation's history, including a variety of paintings and textile pieces by some of the sisters of the presentation. And the Franciscan sisters have had several artists as well, including an art shop titled Open Eye by Iva in the 70s. You've probably noticed that the BBM sisters and Centennial Dominicans are very heavily represented in this presentation, while the other three congregations, not so much. I've explained the uniqueness of Mary and Eve by Sister Grace and why the cistercians only have one piece here. It's part of cloistered life. Congregations with flourishing art today have been consistently watering the gardens of art making for decades, and now we can enjoy the fruits of their labor. Sometimes there isn't somebody to water that garden, and either focus is shifted elsewhere or the community just struggles to survive. This isn't a judgment or a criticism. There's plenty of work to do, and however much I would love art making to be prioritized equally everywhere, that's not realistic. Which brings me to the broader community, the Dubuque area and beyond. These 4 congregations of sisters are changing. And it's up to all of us to make sure that their stories, artwork, and creative spirit continue on. Our broader community has been shaped by them. If they hadn't done all this work, we wouldn't be here having this event. As I said earlier, I'm an associate of the BBM sisters, and the other sisters have associates as well. And everyone is developing what it looks like to have more associates and sisters. I'm still developing what this project looks like too. For those who are artists, I'd like you to ask yourselves if any aspect of the vows might affect or improve your artistic practice. I'm not saying that you have to take any of the vows. You could experiment and try any of them as a trial run. Think about how communal living could impact your art making. And for everyone, what gardens are you watering? What will bear fruit for you and your community in the future? This is only the most recent of several events about local women religious artists. From September of 18 through January of 19, there was an exhibit titled Just to Live is Holy, Women Religious, and a Tradition of Art, Faith, and Justice. This is the book that went along with the exhibit. This was showcasing a lot of local artwork alongside the works of Louise Haynes and Coretta Kent. And about 15 years ago, there was an exhibit called Women and Spirit, Catholic Sisters in the United States, here at Carnegie Stout. Exhibits like these are wonderful, and hopefully there will be more in the future, and people who aren't me can put them together. While I plan to continue this project, I'm doing this in Milwaukee again in a month, I do want this to be a larger community effort. Now, if you have not seen the Sacred Waters exhibit at the Mound, I highly recommend you set aside time to go and enjoy Sister Isabel Rafferty's beautiful waterscapes. And I would like to thank all of you. Thank you, Susie, for teaching me how to get permission for all of these images. I'd like to thank Louise Haynes for already laying the groundwork for all of this. And thank you, Priscilla Woods, for lending me these pieces. Are there any questions? Go for it.
I was just wondering, have you considered adding pictures? The sisters do a lot of digital stuff.
Photography?
Yeah, photography for.
I have considered it. I know nothing about photography, and I'm not sure if I'm the person for that. I do think photography is a valid art form, which is why I think somebody who knows more about photography would be a better person for it.
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Okay, just one more community that is very small right now, but the Visitation Sisters were also part of Dubuque. So I don't know that they have any artists at this point in time, but.
Yeah, thank you. I was emailed the flyer for the exhibit that was here at Carnegie Stout 15 years ago, and that was the first time I ever saw Visitation Sisters. Thank you for that, because I just figured, oh, something must have happened over the past 15 years. But thank you. Yeah?
Not so much a question, Kate, I'm just grateful for the background that you've had accumulated so far. To realize that art has been around in religious communities, both music and art, long before Vatican II. So the spirit of being able to freely express whatever it was that needed to be expressed. But do you see have you gone well, this is a question of maybe for the future. There are a lot of younger women religious, young people, and I would be interested to know if there were artists, or there are artists among them. I know there are, but I just don't know offhand. What is the new spirit of living the vows today? It's coming, that could come out in their artwork. This is primarily wonderful past, but if you ever come across that, it would be very fascinating to know how that's being expressed today.
Oh, I can tell you all about that right now.
Good. Okay.
So firstly, Sister Grace, she was born in 71. Somebody who's better at math can do it. 54?
55.
55.
Because I was born in 71. 54.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So for the younger women, so let's say those who are under 50, the vast majority of those who are joining religious orders are going more towards cloistered communities. Back to the habit, back to the liturgy of the hours where you go to mass, but every hour you wake up at 3 a.m. Very strict adherence to, let's say, pre-Vatican II ways of living. I don't think that's going to be permanent. I think that that is filling a very specific need. The need that you're not going to get up here. Stability. Let's say you're 20 years old and your older siblings are all carrying hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt and they can't get a good job. And you spent part of school at home because of the pandemic. And everything's advertised to you all the time. There's major instability. You have no sense of guidance. Where are you going to go? Well, I think it makes perfect sense to go someplace where you don't decide what you wear. You don't decide what time you wake up in the morning. You don't decide what you eat. Somebody above you makes those decisions. Same thing with the military. I don't like to make that comparison, but I think for a lot of younger people who went through this, that's very appealing. And I'm not alone. There was actually a study coming out of strict religious life in the UK, where a lot of younger people were saying, this is stable. I don't need to wonder where I'm gonna live in the next month. I don't need to wonder where my next meal is gonna come from. Nobody's advertising to me. There's no AI. So these cloisters are getting more popular with younger people, but I don't think it's gonna stay that way. I think that that kind of regiment, it'll stay for some people. I think some people are genuinely called to that. But I think other people will eventually mature and grow and realize, wait a minute, this isn't for me. Does that make sense? Yeah. And when it comes to the arts, like I said earlier, cloistered life, you only get 1 hour of recreation time a day. And recreation time usually means you all sit in a room together and you talk about the weather. I don't like to say that, but all of the ex-cloistered nuns I've spoken to who are under 50 have said that's what recreation time is. I think that's another part of why those who are called to the arts might eventually move on to something else. Does that answer your question?
Thank you,
Yeah. I'm open to other points of view. It's just after working to listen and to read and to understand, this is what I'm finding. Yeah?
Jay, this is going back to what you said about the vows,
Yes.
and it clicked in my head a conversation I recently had with an artist that I had recently met here in Dubuque about the connection, and this is about art history. She was, I don't know much about art, but she was trying to help me understand art history. And what she said in relation to the vow, and it clicked in my mind in relation to the vow of poverty. She said there's a real connection between art and wealth.
Yes.
And she said, if you go back far enough, and it makes so much sense, the only people who could afford, like in medieval times or whatever, who could afford a self-portrait, for example, were people who had money to pay the artist to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, like back in the 1500s or 1600s with the formation of the guilds,
Mm-hmm.
that it was a good thing there were wealthy people, because they could afford the products that the people working in the guilds wanted to, create. And so there was definitely a relationship there.
Mm-hmm.
But then the interesting thing that Tamsi said was that with the advent of photography, and this goes to Elizabeth's question, with the advent of photography, it kind of collapsed that.
Yes.
And anybody who could afford a camera, could do art
Mm-hmm.
through photography. And then she said, and that really was, and this is fascinating to me, that was really one of the driving forces in abstract art.
Yes.
Because the photography could capture like the pastoral scenes and the things that that people had been painting. And so they had to paint something that nobody understood.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very interesting to me, but the point being, your comment about the vow of poverty, and in connection with the fact that art and wealth were very much connected.
Yes. I do want to add on that. I see there are more questions, and I do want to add on that. You were right about photography, and then, so here are all the books at the library that I picked out. I don't have a library card here, I'm not checking these out, but you can. So this refers more to what I was saying about the feminist movement, bringing textiles, ceramics, and other kinds of more tactile artwork to near equal standing to oil painting, metal sculptures, and so on. I mean, a lot of the artists of time, including those who are saying this is not art, were saying, well, this is the artwork of women. This is women's artwork, which was a part of class. I mean, think about the women artists who did create oil paintings. Big money, big money. So you're correct, photography, and then eventually quilts, embroidery, pottery, ceramics, basket weaving as kinds of art that would be accepted in high-end galleries, in big collectors, in auctions, in museums. This was bringing, I don't want to say bringing down in the sense of lower classes, I don't mean down like depressing. But yes, these are all major steps of bringing what's considered to be fine art closer to the masses of people. And I also want to say that museums, galleries, collectors and all that are not arbiters of what's art either. And from what I've seen, a lot of women religious artists were doing that before the secular movement started, especially before museums caught up. Like I said, I went to Alverno, and Sister Helena Steffensmeyer, she was a big one. She was doing wood sculptures and ceramics in the 50s, long before museums and galleries and academic programs, secular academic programs caught up. All right, another question here.
So, my name is Rachel, I'm the executive director at Love Strokes Art Center, which is just one block north here. We're a new nonprofit, and we do arts education, visual art education, and support for professional artists. Thank you for your presentation. I have wonderful, it's just fantastic. I'm also a great fan of the history of the women religious in this, and the women themselves in this community. I taught at Clark for a long time. And I also got to study art at Clark as an older adult when I was there. And I was really lucky for that. And one of the things that strikes me, kind of going also to your ideas, thinking about wealth and access, it's why we started the Art Center in so many ways. We go back to the 19th century, schooling in this area, if you wanted to study the arts, you had to be a paying student. You had to be able to pay extra for those lessons. Even now, as we try to run scholarship classes and that kind of thing, materials are expensive. So women who were able to enter congregations, regardless of class, and many of your congregations did make things quite accessible, no matter which women were coming to your congregations, they all got access to the materials and the time in addition, right? Because there's money involved in that materials part. So it's just this interesting idea that regardless of even the accessible arts, if you will, there's still an amount that has to be paid in order to be able to make.
Yes.
And it's just a really interesting for me, justice question in who gets to access art education.
Yep.
And, you know, if it's only those who can afford, then all of these spiritual, secular, and other ideas that are at the kernel of all of our community, it will miss so many of those ideas. We'll miss those, right? And so that, how do we nourish those seeds that are in folks today? And I think having conversations about the art that can happen when we make space, time, places, offer the materials, offer the education to people to make this art, I think the treasures just become, right, even greater. And so I guess my question is, I know this is a long ramble, but I'm excited about what you're talking about and what you're doing. And my question, I'm sorry, I came a little late too, so you may have named this when you first started, is as you're presenting this information and all the research that you've done, what would you like to see, not the detailed steps, but what would you like the outcome to be for our community, large community, right, in terms of art and access?
Well, the simple answer is I want people to have this information, to view this art, to listen to these stories, whether from me or from somebody else, and to come up with things that I can't imagine. That's the simple answer. But with more detail, firstly, more spaces to show art in general. Dubuque is already pretty good with murals, but more is good. More places to show art, just in general, whether they're for sale or just to show, which would also mean showing more of the artwork by women religious. And I would like artists, which I know that's a very broad group of people who are loosely connected by one idea that's hard to define. I want more artists to know about. I'm gonna make a bold claim, I think especially in terms of from the early 1950s through the mid 1980s, I think the artwork by women religious in the United States constitutes an art movement. Because there are such similar themes that people were creating independently of each other. And really, it does illustrate Vatican II in the United States. Like, all the images you see that, you've probably never heard of Sister Mary Charles McGough, you've seen her work. If you've seen in any liturgical missal that had some kind of, looks like a print artwork, it's probably from her. Nobody knows who she is, except for Dubuque. I want these stories to be told so that these artists, again, wide group of people, can see how do their lives differ, whether that's living in community, having the charisms, having the vows, having this heritage and history, and asking, how can I integrate that into my artwork? Like I mentioned, Women's Space in the studio for the dinner party, and how Judy Chicago created these spaces that were actually really, really similar to convents and abbeys. Like, she's Jewish, she had no idea what she was doing when it comes to creating spaces for Catholic women, but she was kind of reinventing the wheel. And look what happened. The dinner party is one of the most famous pieces created by women in the United States in the 20th century. So I think that when artists, maybe some people who have some funding, she started with like this much money, could create more spaces like that. It's not just to create artwork that lives in a museum somewhere, it's also the experiences. Like the women artists, now I know that several of them, I've been told, were very soft-spoken people who didn't really speak much and created this incredible work. Once you go through that kind of experience where you don't have somebody, where's dinner? Where are my pants? It's a lot easier to speak up for yourself. That's a huge part of it. For somebody who's going with a lot of student loan debt and then trying to make a brand, which is antithetical to this kind of artwork, that's very hard. It's very hard to advocate for yourself. So I think there's a wide variety of artists who can see how this kind of life is very different from their secular life, and to integrate what parts of it could help them become advocates for themselves. Does that make sense? Right. Also, whoever's doing your social media is really good.
Oh, thank you.
Andy, I've seen you raise your hand a couple of times. Oh.
Whose turn is it? Do you wanna go? Okay. Have you contacted Voices? Jean Tully?
Yes, I have. I've sent several messages. Yes. I do have a contact over there who is quite swamped and does get back to me, but usually like a couple months after I reach out. So yes, but also it's really hard.
Yeah.
We're
Because
hoping to open our doors.
to get the different artists to come and speak would be so cool. I know it probably will take a year or two, but I think it's worth it to do it. And if you presented it in a social justice type way,
Yeah.
it would be, I think it would be well attended, and I think it'd be a good thing for you to get it out there.
Thank you. I am having my solo show there November and December. It took several months to go from me asking, did you get my application, to getting a response. So maybe if I submit the idea now, it'll happen next year, which is when my schedule opens up anyway. But okay, thank you for that.
And they have shows here at the library too,
Yes.
and they're 2 years out, but
Yeah.
they're well attended also.
Mm-hmm.
you might know Henry Madison, who's the photographer.
Oh, yeah.
And we had one of his, a show of his photography at the Mound a couple of years ago. And, cause I had met him, and anyway, he said, well, do you have any art here?
Oh my
I said,
gosh.
Yeah, so I walked him around, and it's all our sister's art.
Yeah.
And that poor guy, he was blown away. And I wasn't trying to over impress him. I said, this is Villa Derby's, this is Kiara's, this is Stephanie's watercolors, these are Liz Devine's print, Rosemary Conway's print, making them. And they're all over, or they were before we had these guys. But, he said to me, why isn't this out? Why isn't this up someplace? This should be all over. And I said, well, you find me a gallery that says Sister Art, and there's a cachet to it about,
Behind
it's not
you.
any good.
Behind you.
Yeah.
She's just raising her hand. Yeah, Henry has told me that exact same story.
Oh, has he?
Yes. I'm meeting with him on Monday. I'm in the executive committee of the Senior Art Group.
Tell him I said hi. But I do think it does surprise people to discover we have sister artists, which I don't know why, but it is an image thing, I think, too.
Okay, I just wanna know, I don't know if I picked this up in your presentation or not, but are you strictly focused on the Dubuque area?
My plan is to give this presentation in various regionalities,
No,
not
I
just
mean in
cities.
terms of the artists.
Here, yes. When I go do this in Milwaukee, I'm gonna focus on Milwaukee and so on. I want
Because
to,
the Sisters of St. Joseph's of LaGrange, Illinois.
Yeah.
Their mission, it's Ministry of the Arts. And they
Yes.
have a lot of stuff, yeah.
I'm familiar with them,
Yeah.
I need a personal assistant so that I will have the spare time to go there. I'm familiar with them, yeah.
This is not to push Pat's idea further, but a lot of vocations today are coming from Africa and Central and South
Yes.
America. And I don't know the numbers in terms of the US communities who have vocations from different. But and again, that's another, the indigenous art that they would have grown up with maybe, and are any of their artists there who are expressing it, because that's a whole nother realm, and I know I'm not putting that on you, but that's a whole other question about, there must be that wonderful expression. And second thing, could you say a little bit more about your art therapy background and how that's played out for you?
Sure. So firstly, I will say that as I continue this project, I am only focusing on the United States just because this is already so big. And I think expanding that, which is valid and should happen, that one person can't do all that. So that's true, and also maybe someday I'll have a grant so I can have somebody else do this with me. And then the next question was about my art therapy background. All right, so I went to Alverno College, run by the School Sisters of St. Francis in Milwaukee, mostly because they had an art therapy program. I knew that I wanted to get into the arts, but I didn't want to do commercial art. I wanted to integrate artwork with therapy. But I did learn meeting one-on-one all day, every day, where it's just appointment all day, that would make me crazy. So I did study art therapy at Alverno, and I don't know how familiar anybody here is with Alverno. They don't have tests. Instead of doing a test, you have to get up in front of a room full of people and give a presentation on what you learned. So that way you demonstrate you learn the topic and you get good public speaking. It works. So that also means that whatever it is you're doing, it's not just you and a Scantron, or you and a piece of paper that you give and you get graded, and then at the end of it, it is communal. It is always communal. Everybody's involved, no matter what the topic is, no matter what the focus is, no matter what the presentation is. It is communal, it is collaborative, which was very jarring for me when I graduated and I went back out into the real world and I saw most places don't work that way. And again, like I said, I never wanted to do one-on-one counseling all day, every day. I wanted to do more collaborative, more connecting with other people. I started working at the Riverview Center. I was doing art therapy in group settings. When I was a hospice chaplain, I integrated art therapy with some patients who said I always wanted to learn how to paint. I always wanted to learn how to crochet. Well, here they could, and then I didn't pass these I know that's very meandering, but that's just what my life has looked like. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I appreciate that, because
Sure.
there's a lot of spirituality in art that's used, and I don't call it art therapy, but it's a way of expression that's so different than words or whatever, and so as that is incorporated into religious sisters art, other artists too have a spirituality focus or background, or bringing people together. Are you familiar with Lenicia Rouse? What's her last name? Tinsley. She's an African-American woman who incorporates a lot into the communal experience of art with people. Anyway, if you ever have a chance to look her up, it is another way of seeing how spirituality and art, and I can send you that.
Yes, send it to me, please. Thank you.
Some artists are going now into computer art.
Yeah.
And then now AI. And, I watched a program on, I think it was PBS, and this, fellow, he had a whole, like a warehouse. And all he did was, flash these colors all around.
Yes.
And, I thought if I was in the room, I'd go dizzy, but it was considered art.
Yes.
And I suppose that's a different kind of art.
Yes.
And I know, this Father McGrath, he does icons.
Yes.
And they're beautiful.
Mhm.
It's all, a lot of it is computer.
Yes. So I will say I don't remember the name of the artist, but the one with the lit up room. I experienced one of those rooms at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, probably about 15 years ago. The room was about the size of this room, but no windows, there was only one door, with the guard sitting next to it. And the light in the room was such a bright orange that every other color looked grayscale. You could walk in with a red shirt, and it looks great. It was really an amazing experience to be in a room where everybody looks like a black and white TV with this intense orange light. So having been in it, yeah, I get it. I do think that, art is, like I said, it's part visual, it's part tactile as an experience. The Art Institute, they used to have an exhibit where they had replicas of statues so that people who were visually impaired could touch, well, anybody could touch them. It was intentionally for people who could not see the art, where they could just touch these replicas made out of plaster, wood, metal, and so on. Really sad that's gone. So I do think that experience-based artwork, whether that's lights in a room or something that we can't even imagine, that's equally valid too. I believe Vatican has come out against AI-generated art. I know that's a big controversy. Everybody has their opinions. I'm not a fan. I like to leave it at that. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes?
I came in late, maybe you talked about this, but you mentioned art and wealth go together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we live in an economy today that's not a gifted economy, it's a market economy.
Yep.
And the first thing to go in the schools are the arts.
Yep.
So how do we change that? And I know many of our sisters who were really artists at heart didn't have time to do their artwork because they were busy being math teachers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So we bought into that, idea of a consumer, a market. So I don't know how we get back to that when we're taking the arts away from the students.
I have an answer, but I'm just gonna shut the door before I say it, so nobody share what I'm about to say. Graffiti. Okay. I'm not telling anybody to break the law. But no, really, people have been doing that since before it was an idea, like, just be careful. You didn't hear it from me. A little angel told it to you. But that is all way. Public art, even though that doesn't involve a gallery, doesn't involve a museum, doesn't involve renting a space. Sometimes you need to rent a space depending on where you're going to do the public art. But having people, including students, create some kind of sculpture from recycled material. Bottle caps that would otherwise be thrown out and go to landfill. See if you can get a permit to put something like that in a park, even just for a day. I think public art is really the way that we keep this alive until the pendulum swings the other way, and when it comes to art funding, people come back to their senses, because it'll happen someday. We just need to hobble by until that happens. There are outsider ways, and again, like before museums and galleries and schools valued quilts, embroidery, ceramics, and pottery, people were still doing it. It just wasn't acknowledged. In many ways, textiles, which I know more about, that continues to be more accessible, mostly because you can take it with you. You can't really take an oil painting with you. If you're riding a bus somewhere, you're not gonna take out an easel and your oils and your media and your water cup and your palette brushes, but if you have knitting, you can do that. So I know it's not easy, but public art, legally, follow the law, public art is a big way to do that, and also turning towards more accessible media. It'd be great if everybody had access to learn how to do oil painting or marble sculptures. Unfortunately, that's just not realistic, at least not now. So then, there are other media, there's more accessible media. And I can tell you, if you go to any secondhand store, there's so much fabric. Like, you can spend like $4 and get enough fabric to make a quilt. So, I know it's not great, but it is possible.
This is just related to your question about trends. I'm aware, like, my brother's partner, for example, she's part of the trend of people who are turning to coloring for stress relief.
Yes.
You know, she's big into coloring books and pencils, and I got some for my birthday, and yeah, so, I mean, in terms of people's awareness of that these are activities that allow you to step out of the rat race.
Mm-hmm. And something that people are turning back towards as well are zines. Short for magazine. Zine it's not published. Like, you don't go get it printed somewhere and it's published. It's not like, I don't even know what magazines are anymore. Is Cosmo still a magazine? Let's say Cosmo. Published magazine that a whole lot of people get paid and pay a lot of money to create a magazine. A zine is when somebody or a group of people, they get their own paper, they get their own pencils, pens, crayons, paint, whatever, and they make it themselves. And then they sell it either for very, very little money, like $1, or give it away. Those are becoming more popular, especially in bigger cities and here in Dubuque. I mean, that is a great way to not advertise and not have AI, which is, it seems like the main thing a lot of people, especially younger people, are trying to escape. It's a great way to educate people. Like, the main zine that I know about in this area is about the life cycle of a local mussel, mussel, like a mussel with shells that lives in the water. And that's a great way to educate people. And it doesn't involve a classroom or funding or a board, you just do it. And I think that, especially with AI, more and more people are going to be doing that. Which again, I think it speaks to the creative spirit, not of individual people, but of humanity. And to get back to the Bible, created in God's image, well, God's a creator, so therefore humanity are creators, we keep creating. And if you're thinking, well, I'm not very creative, could you please take on my administrative work? Yes.
In a sense, are tattoos a form of, art?
Yes.
That's-
I don't know if everybody heard, but our tattoo is a form of art. Yes, absolutely. I will say, if anybody's looking at you, Diane, if anybody's thinking about getting a tattoo, please go see an actual tattoo artist and check out their studio and make sure everything's clean. Please don't go to Jim Bob's kitchen and get it done. Please be clean. But yes, tattoos absolutely are an art form, especially an indigenous art form. I mean, there are people where they just go in, they see the Tasmanian devil and say, I want that. And then there are people who talk with the tattoo artist about what design they may want, what colors they may want, the thickness of the lines, where on the body, which drastically changes the kinds of tattoo you can get. If you're willing to sit there for 8 or more hours at a time. So yes, absolutely it's an art form.
I met a woman one time, in a store, and her whole arm was tattooed with a beautiful nature scene.
Yes.
So I just mentioned to her how beautiful it was, and she told me the symbolism of it. And she did exactly what you were saying to the person who did it. Thought that was interesting, because I never thought of tattoos that way.
Yes, absolutely. And tattoos, like, I was born in '85, and tattoos started to get very popular when I was graduating high school, because that's when it became a lot easier to get a hold of clean needles. That's why they got more popular. More and more people who had always thought, oh, I'd like to do tattooing, well, they could, because they could get needles. Which is another reason why, if you're thinking about getting one, please go somewhere and inspect how clean they are. And that really opened up a very niche field that was hard to get into to a lot of people. That goes back to the wealth. People finally had access, which is why I have all this. Any more questions? I do want this to be a conversation here. I do want this to be a conversation. I want people to be able to talk with each other. Like, yes, I've done a lot of work and I'm happy to share it, but again, we're all at, wait, did anybody drive like 3,000 miles to get here? No, cool, then we all are in community with each other. Like, my goal is to have the community communicate with each other. So start talking.